You weren't taught to think. You were trained to feel, to react, to defend, to explain. Every moment of discomfort, you labeled as a problem. Every drop of tension, you rushed to release. Not because it was right, but because it was automatic. You were given a system, not one of strategy, but of emotion. And here's the brutal truth. That system doesn't serve you. It exposes you. Because when you feel first, you think last. And by the time you think, the damage is done. You've been decoded, framed, played, all without force, all without control, all with one simple access point, your emotional reflex. You call it being in tune. But what if it's not clarity? What if it's conditioning? They don't need to overpower you. They only need to pull the right emotion and watch you move. You think you're making decisions, but really, you're following sensation, impulse, reaction, loop. So what if there was another way? What if you didn't need to feel less, but think in layers before you let any emotion steer? This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming composed, structured, strategic, because emotional chaos doesn't make you human. It makes you available, predictable, manipulatable. And that ends now, because if your emotions can be accessed, your system can be rewritten. And if your system is open, you're not the one running it. Let's change that. You weren't born reactive. You were trained into it. From the moment you showed emotion, someone responded, rewarded it, punished it, shaped it. You learned fast. Smile to be liked. Stay silent to be safe. Over-apologize to avoid conflict. Not because it's right, but because it kept the system stable. This is the emotional default loop, our reactive circuit. Predictable, accessible, exploitable. Every time something triggers you, you go straight to the emotional layer. Then you act, then you regret, then you repeat. This isn't dysfunction, it's design. They don't need to suppress your logic. They just need to interrupt it, delay it, distract it. Because when emotions are in charge, strategy never arrives on time. And the truth is, they don't even need you to feel the wrong things. They just need you to feel first. Before you assess, before you question, before you choose. Because once the emotion moves, the frame has already shifted, and you're no longer the one setting it. This is why guilt works, why urgency works, why shame works. Because these signals bypass your system and activate your submission. They're not feedback, they're commands, disguised as feelings. And here's what most people never ask. What if the emotion isn't yours? What if it was placed there to reroute you? That's how power is stolen, not through domination, but through emotional redirection. And you call it being sensitive, empathic, open. But open to what? To whom? If your doors are always open, you don't control what enters. And sooner or later, your reactions become someone else's strategy. That's why the first upgrade is not to kill emotion, but to contain it, to recognize it, observe it, let it scream, but not let it lead. Because emotion without control is like fire without boundaries, warm one moment, destructive the next. And if you let it burn everything down, don't blame the flame, blame the absence of structure. So if emotion is the first layer, what sits above it? Let's build that now. The most dangerous people don't think faster. They think in layers. They don't react. They stack. Every signal they receive gets filtered, processed, assessed, and only then acted on. That's the architecture you were never taught, because they didn't want you to pause. They wanted you to perform, to react fast, to feel fast, to decide fast. But fast is fragile. Fast is readable. Fast is predictable. Layered thinking doesn't move fast. It moves deliberately. And here's how it works. Layer 1. Emotional recognition. What am I feeling right now? Simple question. Most treat it. They feel anger and call it truth. They feel shame and call it identity. Layer 2. Tactical pause. No action, just breath. Time is the weapon. Delay creates distortion for them, not you. Layer C. Frame assessment. Whose frame am I standing in right now? This changes everything. You're not just reacting to what was said. You're reacting to where it was said from. And that context determines your leverage. Layer Chahar. Strategic outcome mapping. What's the consequence of responding now versus staying still? Not what feels good. What creates advantage? Layer Punch. Reframing reality. What story do I want to install in this moment? You're not reacting to a reality. You're selecting which one to reinforce. Most people live and die in layer 1. You build up until your response is no longer emotional, but engineered. Because once your mind thinks in layers, you no longer fear pressure. You welcome it, because pressure exposes who's shallow. You don't flinch. You filter. You don't argue. You observe. You don't rush to speak. You let silence stack leverage. Because the one who thinks in layers says outcomes no one else prepares for. You start to see patterns others are blind to. When they're baiting you, when they're revealing too much, when their frame is slipping, and while they're lost in emotion, you're navigating architecture. This is mental control, not because you suppress what you feel, but because you've built a system that directs it. And soon, you'll stop asking, why do I feel this way? And start asking, what layer is this trying to bypass? Because manipulation lives in speed, but power lives in structure. And the deeper your structure, the harder it is to hijack your system. But structure means nothing if your system isn't sovereign. So, next, we build the chain of command inside you. Most people assume they're in charge of their own mind. But if you ask, who gave the last order that you followed? They fall silent, because inside them, there is no command structure, only reaction loops, only emotional surges, only inner noise masquerading as decisions. A mind without hierarchy is a mind up for grabs. So here's the real question. Who runs your internal chain of command? Who makes the final call when fear, desire, logic, and ego all speak at once? If your answer is, I don't know, or it depends, you've already lost the frame. Every powerful system, military, intelligence, strategy, has a structure. So should you. Let's build it. Level 1. The commander. Your frame. This is your sovereign voice. It does not argue. It defines direction. Every decision must align with this or it's rejected. Level 2. The analyst. Your logic. Tactical. Detached. Cold. Its job isn't to feel, it's to measure. It reads tone, pattern, timing, weakness, and feeds that data up, not down. Level 3. The sentinel. Your emotional gatekeeper. Feelings arrive here, but they don't pass through, unfiltered. Their job? Signal, not steer. They report. They don't command. Level 4. The executor, your behavior engine. This layer doesn't act based on mood. It acts when alignment is confirmed. That's what makes your moves calculated. Not just effective, but intentional. And here's the key. The order only moves down, never sideways, never upward, never emotional to executive. But for most people, it's the opposite. The emotion gets triggered, the action follows, the frame adjusts later, if ever. That's chaos. That's how they get played. Because if any voice can hijack your mind and trigger movement, you're not sovereign. You're open source. The hierarchy is what separates noise from signal. It's how you protect your mind from mutiny, from inner sabotage, from the voice in you that sounds like truth, but was trained in trauma. And here's what they fear most. Someone who doesn't act until their commander gives the green light. Someone who listens to their anger, but doesn't let it lead. Someone who hears the guilt, but doesn't fold. Someone who can feel everything, but still wait. Because waiting isn't weakness. It's proof of rank. You don't need to speak fast, move fast, prove anything. You just need a system inside you that doesn't flinch when triggered, because the order to move hasn't been authorized. That's discipline. That's sovereignty. That's mental hierarchy. But even with this system in place, there's one more thing that breaks empires from the inside. Emotional traps set by others. Let's deal with them now. And how to step over them. The system outside you isn't chaotic. It's calculated, built to trigger you, not by force, but by feeling. Emotional traps aren't accidents. They're architecture. They know what makes you move. Guilt, urgency, validation, fear of being misunderstood. And so they design environments, conversations, offers, threats, all meant to pull your inner structure out of alignment. This is external emotional warfare, silent, subtle, precise. And if you don't think in layers, you won't see the trap. You'll call it intuition, or worse, connection. Let's break down the top tactics they use. Guilt, submission. You're really going to walk away like that? You've changed. Translation. You're stepping outside the frame I could control. Urgency. Blind action. This opportunity won't last. You need to decide now. Translation. If I slow you down, you'll see it's a trick. Validation. Frame surrender. You're the only one who understands me. No one else gets me like you do. Translation. I'll flatter your ego until you forget your logic. Uncertainty, obsession. They don't give you clarity. They give you just enough attention to keep your system looping. You don't know where you stand, so you keep trying to define it. And that's the trap. None of these are emotional failures. They are emotional engineering. You were not weak. You were responding to stimuli you didn't know were coded. But now you do. And here's the rule. If it moves you too quickly, step back. If it flatters you too deeply, check your center. If it feels like pressure, assume it's a trap. Because real strategy doesn't require pressure, it requires presence, stillness, distance. You never escape the influence game, but you can step above the board, watch the pieces, anticipate the openings, and never move unless it benefits your system. You don't need to explain why you paused. Your stillness will do that for you. Because the moment you stop feeding their feedback loop, they lose leverage. And when someone realizes they can no longer control your inner weather, they'll either exit or evolve. You don't have to fight. You just have to see the play and not play it. Because in emotional warfare, the one who doesn't enter the trap is always the one controlling the outcome. And when you're no longer reactive to their traps, you become free to use silence as a weapon, not a defense. Let's turn that weapon on next. Delayed emotion as a power move. The strongest minds don't speak first. They don't need to, because when silence is weaponized, It doesn't just withhold words. It reclaims control. Most people think silence is absence, weakness, avoidance. That's what they've been conditioned to believe. Because the system wants you loud. Loud people are easier to track, easier to decode, easier to manipulate. But silence, real silence, créate pressure, stratégique silence, isn't quiet. It's calculated withholding. It's the refusal to react. Not because you don't feel, but because you decide when feeling becomes action. And that's power. Here's why it works. Silence forces the other side to reveal more. The longer you say nothing, the more they feel the need to fill the space. And in that scramble, they leak, they over-explain, they self-sabotage. Silence slows the game. Pacing is power. If they control the rhythm, they control the frame. But when you go silent, you disrupt that tempo. And now they're moving to your beat. Silence builds weight. Every word you don't say makes the next one land harder because you didn't give it freely. You designed it. Silence isn't passive. It's selective warfare. You don't engage every battle. You don't explain every move. You don't correct every misread. Because your law isn't spoken. It's felt. And the longer you hold your frame in silence, the more others orbit around it. Not because you pushed, but because you didn't chase. The real function of delayed emotion is not suppression. It's preparation. You feel it, but you don't release it. You let it burn quietly until it becomes leverage. Leverage to act precisely, speak surgically, and exit clean. This is what they'll never understand. The person who responds fastest is rarely the one in control. Control moves slow. It waits. It gathers. It chooses the moment. And when it strikes, it doesn't shake. It defines. This is why silence is terrifying to the unstructured, because they rely on feedback to stay centered. Without your reaction, they have nothing to push against. And that's when they fold. So, from now on, you pause before you reply. You breathe before you speak. You let tension build without flinching. And you speak only when it serves the outcomino, the emotion. Because power is not just what you say, it's what you withhold, until the moment it matters most. And when you can delay emotion like that, you stop being reactive. You start becoming the frame. But now comes the final move, embedding this system so deeply that no one internal or external can break it. Let's end it. There are only two types of minds in the world, those that are structured and those that are used. If you don't build layers, you will be moved by anyone who can make you feel. That's not a metaphor, that's a threat, and it's already happening. Every time you react without pause, you become predictable. Every time you speak without processing, you become transparent. Every time you feel before thinking, you hand over your system. And the ones who understand this, they don't need to overpower you. They just wait for your signal. Then they step in and move you where they want. But when you think in layers, that signal never arrives. Because layered minds don't react. They assess. They watch. They shift space before they ever shift tone. You become unreadable, unshakable, unmovable. And that's where power begins. Not when you dominate, but when you can't be played. So here's your next move. For the next 24 hours, delay every emotional response. Not to suppress it, but to reveal its source. Each time you feel triggered, pause. Ask, what is this trying to bypass? Who benefits if I react? Which layer am I ignoring right now? Then wait. Let the emotion pass through the filter. And when the time comes, respond from the frame, not the feeling. This is how you rewire power. Not by fighting your emotions, but by repositioning them under command. You don't need to feel less. You need to obey yourself more. And the self that's worth obeying doesn't live in reflex. It lives in structure. From this point forward, your feelings are not leaders. They are messengers, and nothing moves unless the strategist says so. Think in layers, or be played like one.